Hello there. There went the bell. Suggest we started. So, a couple of days ago, I was tagged into a conversation with Iron Cross, and it was under David Weiser's video, which is a good point. Do you want to add him, please? Anyway, so all it was about was apparently Catholicism was unbiblical. I don't know why. I don't have a horse in this race, but so I said, well, if you want, I'm happy to host a debate. And Ron sort of came up with a number of excuses about me. He only wants it to be done by someone who is, I forgot what the phrase was now. What was it, Jade?
Something about had proper doctrine.
That's right, yeah, proper doctrine, and well, obviously I don't do any of that stuff. So, I actually feel that I'm very good at doing hosting a debate for this because, like I say, I don't take sides on this issue. I may be friends with people, but that's a different story. This is supposed to be about doctrine and and biblical things, biblical matters. And I don't do any of that stuff. So, like I say, it doesn't matter to me. Whoever wins means nothing to me. So, unfortunately, Ron decided that he didn't want to come. I gave him an opportunity a couple of days ago to write a statement of what he what he wants to say, and I would read it out if he didn't want to come. I've heard nothing. So we're just going to do it without him. He didn't want. He wanted one where he had control, or one of his friends had control, and I'm sorry, I really don't. You can't really trust them because they'll moot and boot, and this happens all the time. It becomes silly, and really, this is supposed to be about discussion. And the nice thing about it is, a lot of the things that go on from that side of the fence, it's all drama, and this is about what people are supposed to be here about. That's what the great debate is supposed to be about. So let's have a debate. Let's have a talk about something that is relevant in this. So, with that said, I'm gonna give it Jade so she can go across the first part. We're gonna break it down into sections, the things that Ron has claimed, and basically let people explain themselves. And before that, I hate to pull this on you, Jade, but
No,
Jade,
I'm ready.
Yeah, Jade has said that she's going to come out. Now, so far, she has been an undeclared. So, what side is she on?
I know. What side am I on? Well, when I first started with YouTube, I was just answering a few comments and stuff, and then I got to know people. And one of the things that bothered me was how everyone was automatically pigeonholed when they stated their position. If you said you were a theist, all sorts of assumptions were made. If you said you were a Christian, all sorts of assumptions were made. If you said you were an atheist, all sorts of assumptions were made. If you said you were an agnostic, all sorts of assumptions were made. And I really find that sort of pigeonholing someone, automatically assuming, who they are, what they believe, just because of a title, it really impedes dialogue. How can you have a conversation when people automatically make all these assumptions about you? So I decided to remain undisclosed and just not tell anybody and let them assume. It makes more sense to go by what someone says than by a title that they apply to themselves, especially since those titles can mean so many different things. I'm not going to give any I'm not going to give any names here, but I think we all know that there are atheists in this community that range from being, well, batshit, through being, virulently anti-theist, to being, open to the concept of God. They just have never been convinced. And we have theists in this community that range from batshit to, all the way to being open to questioning their faith. It's the same sort of thing. You can't simply put a title on someone and assume that everything you know everything about them from that title. So what am I? I'm a Roman Catholic. Surprise! I think a lot of people have guessed it. I'm pretty sure everybody in the room here already knew that. I think I've been telling people for quite some time that I am and that I was going to come out. I actually did not intend to remain undisclosed this long. I had intended to, come out, so to speak, a couple of times, but certain things in the community deterred me. Um, and I'm not going to go into that because I would have to bring other people into that, and I just don't think that's necessary. But there were certain attacks, and I felt it was made on people, and I kind of felt it was best if I remained undisclosed to support those people, because I knew I would be attacked via a label. Now, those of you who know anything about me and know the things that I've said, I hope you judge me by what I've said. I also consider myself a secular humanist. I'm a devout secularist. I don't think those two things are contradictory. A faith is just that, it's faith. As a number of atheists have been pointing out for weeks, you don't choose what you believe. This idea that some Christians have that atheists are just suppressing the truth, that they really, really know that there's a God and they're suppressing it, is just absurd to me. You can't choose what you believe. You can't suddenly believe in God if you don't. You can't suddenly disbelieve in God if you don't. Now, through a period of study and research and thinking and talking to other people, you can change your position. We all change our positions throughout our life to various different degrees. I was raised Roman Catholic, but then I grew up, and I discovered philosophy, I discovered literature, I discovered, politics. And literature gives you a lot of ideas. I mean, when you start to learn stuff, when you really mature and you go to college, or in my case, high school too, because I had an excellent education at a Catholic high school, which taught me to think, folks, believe it or not. You find all these marvelous ideas and you fall in love with them, and that's what you're supposed to do. I went through a period where I read everything of George Bernard Shaw. I was totally in love with Shaw, and the ideas in Shaw are just amazing, and so on and so forth. You go to college and you find you attend your philosophy lectures, and you suddenly just look at Aristotle like it's the most amazing thing in the world, and maybe Kant and Hume and everything else. That's the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to think. You're supposed to challenge your beliefs. You're not supposed to be afraid of doubt. And yeah, I was taught that in Catholic school too. So I grew up during the 60s, late 60s, early 70s was my adulthood. And it was a pretty tumultuous time. It was a time during which I explored a lot of different belief systems. And I had friends who were very into it. And there are various different levels of things. There are spiritual levels, for exactly Eastern religions. Alan Watts was very big then, various different Eastern religions. Native American beliefs, Carlos Castaneda and the teachings of Don Juan. I actually had the chance to meet Carlos Castaneda. He came to a class I was in, and we were able to ask him a lot of questions. There were also a lot of psychological movements going on at the time. If you think of Fritz Perls, the Esalen Institute, and even, things like primal screaming. And of course, there are the inner workings, looking into your mind and discovering the secrets of your mind, which was often accompanied by the use of psychedelics. Think Timothy Leary. There is practically an entire religion around psychedelics. But then there are also the political thoughts. I had friends who were Marxists, I had friends who were Maoists, I had friends who were Trotskyites. And all communists are not the same, folks. And certainly I explored those various different, political dimensions. So I'm not, when I say I'm a Roman Catholic, I'm not saying this because, oh, gee, I was brought up that way and that's the way I believe. No, I'm saying I went through a lot of thought, a lot of discussion, a lot of reading, a lot of challenging everything I believe, because I believe you should challenge things. I taught that in Catholic school. You're not supposed to believe something because it's convenient. You're not supposed to believe something because you like it. Or you're not supposed to hold to a belief simply because you like it. You're supposed to hold to it because you believe it and because it resonates with you and it sounds true. Having said this, one of the things that Cliff said, he said he didn't care which side wins, and that's part of the problem we have. People seem to think a side should win. No side should win. we should come to a greater understanding. There is no winning here, or there should be no winning here. Unfortunately, that's the point of view people tend to have. I remember a scene in at Play in the Fields of the Lord. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but there are these Protestant missionaries in South America, and things don't go well. But at one point, the missionaries are talking about how they were winning against the Catholics. And I remember watching this thinking, you know, if that's the only reason you're there, you're doing the wrong thing. You're doing the wrong thing. You're supposed to, you know, introduce people to ideas and thoughts and introduce them to God and tell them what you believe and why you believe it. And let them come to their own decision. So no, I don't think there's any winning here. I don't care if someone's an atheist. I don't care if someone's a various different variety of Christian or a Buddhist or anything else. That's irrelevant to me. I believe if you have sincerely held beliefs, then you're on the path to God. Something I've always said is that the search for knowledge is a search for God, and the search for God is a search for knowledge. And that's the way I look at it. I'm not going to, you know, if someone wants to challenge me doctrinally, personally, well, I don't really care. You know, you can, and I might answer, and I might not. It depends on the way that's handled. But again, you know, in the Bible it does say, in my Father's house there are many mansions. And I know a lot of people believe that only the Catholic Church thinks only Catholics can be saved. Guess what? That's not true. And believe me, I could give you lots of quotes to support that. It's a sincerely held belief. That's what's important. I was taught in Catholic school that the highest rule of the church, and by the way, the church doesn't mean the Catholic Church, it means the people of God. That's what it's supposed to mean. Is that of the educated conscience. And there are two parts to that. One is you must educate yourself all the time about everything. Otherwise you're failing. You're failing in your duty to God. The other is the conscience, which means you have to think about what you're learning. You can't just let something be convenient or what you want. You have to think about it. And yeah, I know this is uncomfortable for people, but you really do have to challenge your beliefs. And I do all the time. I'm not a passive person when it comes to thought. And as again, I said, I think anyone who's seen my comments or seen me in Hangouts know I have no problem expressing my opinion. So that's about it. You know, people have any questions, they might.
Yeah,
so I basically came full
expressed
circle.
your opinion enough, thank you.
What? What'd you say?
I said, shut up. You've expressed your opinion enough, thank you.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to go on too long. So anyway, that's my position.
It's a good point you say. I think I did choose the wrong word when I said winning.
I knew what you meant, but it was actually convenient. Thank you. It worked.
I have to say, Jade, you're a regular Erasmus. Like that's,
oh, thank you.
No. In all seriousness, that's what your speech really reminded me of. Especially considering your acceptance of both humanism and Catholicism.
I think one of the things is you're right about the label thing. About, you know, someone gives you a label, and I mean, at the amount of times, and D is someone who's the same as me. I don't know much about science, and yet the amount of times, well, because you're an atheist, you believe in evolution and stuff like that, and you know, it's like, well, I don't believe in evolution. You know, I expect that, you know, the consensus, which is based upon the peer review process, you know, is going to go the way it's going to go. You know.
Well, that's
Sorry, go on, Max.
I was just going to say, you do actually believe in evolution. So do I. To believe in something means to have a positive dogmastic attitude towards it, or to think of it as being true, or to think that it's the case. Now, you could have beliefs about things that are right or wrong, but what matters is you know about it as well. So knowledge is a true justified belief. So you could, so you could say, not only do I believe in evolution, I know evolution is true because I'm justified in believing it is true.
That's the best way to put it.
But the difficulty is I don't have enough knowledge to know it, as opposed to it's probably right because that's what the consensus says.
Well, there's Thomas Aquinas once said there are two ways you can claim knowledge to something. One, you can know it yourself, or two, you could put your trust in an authority or authorities who know it. The second one is how I claim to know about evolution. I'm not a biologist, but I know the people who do study biology, and if I trust them to make my medicine, to provide me the right dietary facts, then I might as well trust them with the history of human anatomy as well, and biological anatomy and all that.
I think the better way of putting it is that you accept it.
Yeah.
Because the word believe can be used in two different ways. You can be talking about a belief in a deity, which is not on the same level as a belief in evolution. And that's why I always make a point of saying I accept.
Yeah, I remember my mum trying to explain love and saying that the way she loves her husband is very different to the way she loves me and my brother. It's still the same word, but it has a different, context to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're different tokens of love.
Right. Yeah. And I say I trust. We do use different language, and the problem I have is that people when you say believe, people want to take you down this slippery slope.
Yeah.
Or what they think is a slippery slope. So I say I trust in evolution, but yeah, you're right. Knowledge is just a form of belief. It's just justified true belief. And by the way, I just have to say this one last thing is whether some people like it or not, being a Catholic makes me a Christian.
Yeah.
So there.
Yep.
Yeah. That actually brings me on nicely to the little page that I pulled up earlier, which was the creed. Now,
before you do, I mean, we're gonna break it down. So Ron has said a whole bunch of things. So should we sort of have a list? I mean, if we want to use the creed as the first part, then that's.
Well, I think the reason I brought the creed up is because that gives you the base of what the Roman Catholics believe. Okay? It gives you, it just lays it out.
Okay, so what I would do, Cliff, is like work through the claims that he's made to the three of us, because it's all there in the chat, the chat that we had with Ron.
Well, actually, I think
it sounds like the owner has got a good way to start it.
I agree.
Then we'll go through the sections. That sounds about right. And bear in mind, I obviously don't know this stuff. I don't know much about Catholicism. Ironically, I was christened a Catholic, but that was only because my grandma insisted on it. But I never really did any of the believing part, But that's irrelevant anyway. I never did church, not really. So yeah, I mean, all these things you're going to say, that's going to be teaching me something. So effectively, you've got to consider it you're teaching me.
Okay.
As well. So go ahead, Fiona. Go.
Right. All I'm going to do is I'm going to read out the Nicene Creed. There are various forms of the Creed. It's also called the Apostles' Creed. And you can actually check on Wiki to find the versions used by all of the churches, whether it's Episcopalians, Anglicans.
Did you say Apostles' Creed? Wasn't he the guy that fought Rocky?
What?
He's making a joke.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Rocky Balboa.
Apostles' Creed, Apollo Creed. It's a Rocky reference.
I'm sorry.
I've not watched them.
Sorry.
Oh, you are missing out, Fiona. Start watching them.
No, I don't think so. Right.
Just watch Rocky 4. That's the best Rocky.
It is. Anyway, go ahead, Free. I won't interrupt.
Right, so I'm just going to read it out, okay? We believe in one God, the Father, the Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and of all that is seen and unseen. We believe in one Lord, Jesus Christ, the only Son of God, eternally begotten of the Father, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, of one being with the Father. Through him all things were made. For us men and for our salvation he came down from heaven, By the power of the Holy Spirit, he became incarnate of the Virgin Mary and was made man. For our sake, he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. He suffered death and was buried. On the third day, he rose again in accordance with the Scriptures. He ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of the Father. He will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end. We believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life, who proceeds from the Father and the Son. With the Father and the Son, he is worshipped and glorified. He has spoken through the prophets. We believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. We acknowledge one baptism for the forgiveness of sins, and we look for the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. And can I just add on at the end of that, the line which says we believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church is Catholic with a small c. And that's a very important distinction to make, because it means universal. Don't confuse it with universalism. Universal church is basically saying it wasn't just for the Jews, but Paul took it out to the Gentiles as well. It's universal. But that's it. That's the creed. And that is a statement of faith that every Catholic says. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anything in there that any of the anti-Catholic people would argue with.
I just find it interesting when they do.
Because in there, I mean, as I say, many churches use this. It's not just the Catholic Church. You can check it out on Wikipedia, find all the versions. It's just subtle differences in wording.
Now,
sorry, go ahead, Jane.
no, I was just going to go on. Now, the thing is that the Nicene Creed has an important part in the formation of the Catholic Church. It is a very important part to, I think people mandate in forms that you have to, as a pope, learn it and practice it. So the fact that Rob makes the claim that again, we'll get into some of this further down the line, but makes the claim that Catholics aren't Christians is deflated by the fact that they set the Nicene Creed. Is
there a date on it? When was it created?
Well, Nicene Creed, we're not exactly sure. The date's going around. We've got a general gist of when it was written, but we don't know exactly.
Somewhere between 4th and 5th centuries, I believe.
Yeah.
The first council of Nicaea was 325. I'm trying to remember when the second one was.
Yeah.
You can always look it up.
Okay, but it gives
we can go during Hangouts to find out information. Here we go. Second, let me see. Let me see it. What? Oh, this is brilliant. The Second Council of Nicaea is recognised as the 7th of the first 7 ecumenical councils.
Sorry, it's what?
The 7th ecumenical council.
The Second Council of Nicaea is recognised as the 7th of the first 7 ecumenical councils.
That's not encouraging.
The Second Council of Nicaea is the 7th ecumenical council. Yeah, that's great, isn't it? That is the 787. The creed was before that. I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
It sounds almost like they've got a committee, but they didn't actually start keeping minutes until later.
It's just really funny wording that. Nicene Creed. Let's look it up. Oh, they're saying it was the first Council of Nicaea in 325.
Yep.
I thought it was maybe a few years after that. Maybe about 350. But obviously I'm remembering it wrong. Maybe, what date was the canon closed?
It depends. What do you mean, like, when was the actual biblical canon put together?
The canon was declared in the councils, I think, in the Third Council of Carthage, in the late 4th century.
So that would be 3 what? That might be the date I'm mixing up in my head.
Yeah, the Third Council of Carthage was in the last bit of the 4th century, 390 something.
That'll be the one I'm thinking of then.
Yeah, and in that one they declared the canon to consist of the New Testament as we know it, the Old Testament, and 7 of the Deuterocanonical texts, including Maccabees and a few others, if I'm not mistaken. Maccabees, Ezra, these books as well.
Yeah, and they are included in the Roman Catholic version of the Bible.
Let's see.
Maccabees are definitely in it. 66 books in the Protestant canon.
Yeah.
I mean, this might be a bit dull for people to hear,
70.
as trying to figure out dates and things like that. But
history
is an important part of this discussion, because it's not just what's written in a book.
If I just might read out something, it was also it's the Third Council of Carthage, which is dated at 397 AD, and it says, and I'm quoting, "It was also determined that besides the canonical scriptures, nothing be read in the church under the title of divine scriptures. The canonical scriptures are these: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, the sons of Nun, Judges, Ruth, 4 books of Kings, 2 books of Paralipomona, I'm not sure to pronounce that one, Job, the Psalter, the 5 books of Solomon, the books of the 12 prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Tobit, Judith, Esther, the 2 books of Esdras, the 2 books of Maccabees, of the New Testament, 4 books of the Gospels, 1 of the book of Acts of the Apostles, 13 epistles of the Apostle Paul, 1 epistle of the same writer to the Hebrews, 2 epistles to the Apostle Peter, 3 of John, 1 of James, 1 of Jude, 1 book of the Apocalypse of John. Let this be made known also to our brother and fellow priest Boniface, or to our other bishops of those parts, for the purpose of confirming that canon, because we have received from our fathers that those books must be read in the church. Let it also be allowed that the passions of martyrs be read when their festivals are kept." And that basically sums up the Third Council of Carthage. And it was recorded by Dionysius Exiguus, who wrote about it. And the books that I've listed include the Catholic scriptures as well. So that's usually the council that's cited for the earliest biblical canon determined by the Church.
Right, thank you.
Yeah,
that's the date I'm mixing up.
And I'd like to point out that when we studied these in school, because people will say, "Oh, the Catholics put in all these extra books, these apocryphal books." We're taught that they're apocryphal. We're taught that there are certain books that have greater standing than others, which is fairly common in most religious educations. At least ones that are honest about the fact that there is a great deal of doubt as to exactly who took pen to hand. I mean, even with Paul back in that day, people had scribes. Did Paul ever actually write anything, or did he have scribes write it for him? So you always have to look at those sorts of things. And
also in ancient text, it wasn't uncommon for somebody to write in somebody else's name.
Yes.
So for example, I think it's Galatians. Galatians is considered to be not written by a Pauline sort, by Paul himself, but by, I think, I'm trying to remember I think F.F. Bruce, for example, stated that he considers the book of Galatians to be written by somebody who he considers the top Pauline follower.
Right. It's
Well,
also not.
Two of the Gospels were written by the same authors, Marco and Luke and John or something, I think, wasn't it?
That's Acts.
Sorry?
Luke was written by the same person who wrote Acts.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's also not uncommon for people to write things down later. Someone gives speeches and then they write them down later. We see that with some of the later works of Julius Caesar that are written in a completely different hand. And again, Caesar probably never took pen to paper. He had a scribe, and I can't remember the name of the one guy they think wrote it, who wrote these things down, but some of Caesar's later works sound very different. And they're believed to have been written down by someone else much later, after the fact. They're an account of Caesar's activities that were written down much later. So, you see that sort of thing, and you even see it with St. Augustine. There are certain speeches that he gave that nobody wrote down at the time. And again, this is very common. So when you have to look at when you look at the Bible as literature, even even for Christians who believe in the Bible, when you look at it from a literary sense, you have to look at it in terms of the times it was written. And as I said, it's very unlikely that Paul ever took pen to hand and wrote anything. Given his status, he probably had scribes.
I also think the Sermon on the Mount would have been difficult to just, get down word for word.
Well, and that's why you have some of the things that are, contrary, even in the New Testament. I don't care that much about the Old Testament in this sense, because it was written long ago, and a lot of that was, from memory. It was verbal. Can't think of the right term, but people told the stories. Yeah, oral. Thank you. Oral tradition before it was written down. But in the Bible, you've got different people writing from different points of view, and they're going to remember things differently and consider certain things more important than others. Like, for instance, who went with whom. And the other thing that I think, Epi, you brought this up in a hangout, is that there are certain things, I can't remember the term, that everybody takes for granted. So they weren't necessarily written down. I once used an example to a friend of mine, that if I were driving, let's say if I were going to Los Angeles, I would say, I went to L.A. yesterday. And anybody who knows anything about California would know that I took the 5, because that's how you get from here to L.A. But if I decided to take 101, I would tell people I took the 101. But if I just normally went to Los Angeles, I wouldn't bother to mention it, because that would be the standard. Everybody takes the 5. So there are certain things, and I brought this up actually in this argument, which Gary will remember, with a certain person on the Book of Acts. This particular individual basically thought that you should know the ship names and the time of departure of the apostles traveling from here to there. But when you live in a certain time, if things are very, very common, you know how people get from here to there. You know certain things that are just accepted. And people don't write them down because at the time everybody knew that stuff. And I know there's a term for that, and I can't think of it.
Did they even have, did the ships have names then? And for that matter, did they have a departure time? I mean, they just went when they were going to go.
Well, that's basically it. I actually found a master's thesis written by a woman on transportation in the time of Jesus. And the Roman roads were, of course, fantastic. And, again, if you told somebody you went from this place to that place, everybody knew how you got there because there was one road that went there. And it was a Roman road. You didn't need to mention that, by the way, on the way we passed the Cedars of Lebanon or whatever, because everybody knew that was there.
I have a sarcastic answer whenever I get someone leaves a comment under a cycling video saying, roads were made for cars, and I said, wow, those Romans were really ahead of their time, weren't they?
But I also want to throw in there, Galatians is accepted as being written by Paul. Ephesians is the one I was thinking of, not Galatians.
Oh.
Yeah. Ephesians is challenged as being Pauline.
Okay. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, one of the things that's been very interesting to me are the discoveries at Oxyrhynchus. Oxyrhynchus was a city in Egypt, and they basically are digging through their old dump, their refuse dump, and they have been finding all of these documents from, around the time of Jesus, before and after, written in Hebrew and Aramaic and Latin and Koine Greek. And these are real gems for biblical historians, because they talk a lot about the times and how people did things. There are letters, for instance, from one person to another saying, hey, I'm sort of making this up, but basically the right idea, okay. Hey, I don't have that copy of Matthew. Could you have one of your scribes copy it and send it to me? I'll then have my scribe copy it and send it to so-and-so. And so these things tell you how people thought about Christianity at the time, and but also how they acted. The fact that someone would say, yeah, I'll have my scribe copy that and send it to you. I have a couple of books on that, and it's just absolutely fascinating. But we get a lot more information. They've also found the very old, tiny piece of mark at Oxyrhynchus that dates probably from the 1st century. So that's interesting. They're still doing investigations, and some of you may be familiar with the debate between Dr. Wallace and Bart Ehrman, in which Dr. Wallace brought up, he said there was a 1st century manuscript, and Bart Ehrman didn't know about it. Well, it just recently come out where that manuscript came from. Apparently it was, oh dear. It was basically...
Mummy, was it not?
What?
I heard it was in some I remember the story, and I'm remembering one of two things. One is it was in some kind of old pot, or
yes,
yeah.
But it was part of the pot.
One was a mummy for some reason.
Right. It was like part of the pot or something. It was kind of like we think of paper mache. You know what I mean? So they're unpeeling parts. They found out, it's like somebody grabbed this piece of an early, 1st century Christian manuscript and used it to, do paper mache with or something like that. I forget the exact details. But so stuff like this is being discovered all the time. And they're still digging into Oxyrhynchus. There's a website where you can look up all the stuff they're finding. And then some of the stuff is like bills of sale and letters and, complaints to the whatever. So anyway, that's all I want to say about that.
Sorry,
I'm just confirming Brian Cross's objection, so keep talking.
Yeah, just you mentioned Oxyrhynchus, and I'm thinking to myself, I know that name from somewhere.
Yeah, the papyri.
No, it's Oncorhynchus. It's a rainbow trout.
Oh! That's funny. Oh, that's good.
All I could think of is if you say his name 3 times, he'll turn into stone, but that's Rumpelstiltskin.
Yeah.
Well, and I may be pronouncing Oxyrhynchus wrong, too. I freely admit. I read a lot of stuff. I don't necessarily listen to as much stuff as I read, so my pronunciation can sometimes be sort of basic phonetics and screwed up. Also, I'm dyslexic, and I have a tendency to switch letters, so I will...
Yeah,
okay, so you...
Right, so we've worked out now that the creed itself was pretty early, and it was a way of trying to draw together the various disparate, I think might be too strong a word, but groups of early Christians, and to try and actually organise into one statement, a statement of faith. This is what being a Christian is. This is what Christianity is. So that everybody was singing from the same hymn sheet. That was the point of the creed. The basic statement of faith, the basic statement of what it is to be a Christian. It's got nothing to do with Catholic Church or non-Catholic Church, because there was only the one church then. So I think we've lost Maximus. I think maybe his connection's gone.
Well, I don't know why. but for some reason, Ironcross's comments have completely gone from me. So it suggests I've been blocked. I don't know. I've seen replies to him, but nothing from him at all. So he's either deleted them, or...
I'll see if I can bring them up. Just give me a sec.
I just wanted to read them out, because it's better to use his words.
I don't even have a link to the thread.
Sorry, I've got it there. Is it the one on David Wise's video?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got them here.
Right. Okay. I'll.
Would you mind posting it in the side chat? Because I'll read it out. It's better for me to read.
It's going to take me a minute to find his comment, doesn't it?
If you could just put a link to the video.
I'll just put it in the side for you, Fiona.
Yeah, I've got it.
Like I say, they've all seemed to disappear.
Yeah. I was going to say, do you want me to start going through the comments that?
Yeah, we can go through them.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, you guys ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to step on anybody's toe. I want to make sure everybody's okay. So what happened is we got into a conversation with Ron Ironcross in this in David Weiser's video. Did anybody said David the link to this?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
It wasn't David's video. It was Ron's video, I think.
No, but it was David Weiser's comment, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, okay. It was David Weiser's video. Fiona left a message underneath, and then there was a load of 106 comments beneath.
Yeah, after 106 comments, you get a little confused. But so what happened is, so in this discussion, Ron said to Gary, Phony Beetle Maniac, you said, Mary is not prayed to in Catholic law, Ron. And Ron says, seriously, if you want to do a discussion about this, I will bring a ton of evidence how they don't. Ron's response is, Gary, I hate to do this, but you need a spanking. God proclaims salvation is...
Max.
Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Yes. Perhaps Ron wants Gary's number. Anyway, he says, God proclaims that salvation is only through his beloved Son, not through Mary or the Pope. Then what happens is Ron gives a list of quotes from popes, or alleged quotes from popes. One of the problems I've found with a lot of fundamentalists, and I want to make this clear to all of them, if you're going to leave quotes for something, or if you're going to leave references, please look them up yourself. I found the same thing in lists of supposed statistics against homosexuality and reference papers for creationism. Please look them up yourself. Don't go to some website and believe what the website says. Okay, so let's go to the Pope. Pope Pius X said, what will it cost you, O Mary, to hear our prayer? Will it cost you to save us? Has not Jesus placed in your hands all the treasures of his grace and mercy? You sit crowned queen at the right hand of your Son. Your dominion reaches as far as the heavens, and to you are subject the earth and all the creatures dwelling thereon. Your dominion reaches even down to the abyss of hell, and you alone, O Mary, save us from the hands of Satan. Okay, now... Okay,
I don't see where the theological problems are with that. I mean, one scripture I like to use is Ephesians 3:2, where it says, assuming that you have heard of the stewardship of God's grace that was given to me for you, and the author is speaking on Paul's behalf. So I'm not sure I have a problem where somebody is kind of given a stewardship of God's grace to give on to other people. I mean, that's the whole point of missionaries, conversion.
Right.
Yeah. God works through you as an instrument.
And I don't see a problem with this either, theologically. I'd also like to point out that depending on when things were written, you often have very flowery language. All you have to do is look at Renaissance paintings, Renaissance dress, to understand what Renaissance language. This isn't that old, though. But here's the point. The point I want to make about these is, also, is that these are quote mines. Even though, yeah, I don't find a theological problem with it, they're nevertheless quote mines. Because when you look this up and you try to find it, it's all over. There are a lot of anti-Catholic sites, and they have these quotes all over them. And I've tried to find where this supposedly came from, because popes write a lot of stuff. Believe me, popes write a lot of stuff. So you can't just say Pope Pius XI wrote it. 2 places I found out gave a link, said that it was from Pope Pius X's Quas Primus, which is on the Feast of Christ the King. It's encyclical promulgated on 12/11/1925. There's a problem with that. If you look up the encyclical, which is really easy to do, I've found an English translation. It's about Christ the King. There isn't a word about Mary in it. So where this quote actually came from, I don't know. I don't know if a pope wrote it. I don't know where it came from. So to use a quote like this is false. It's deceptive. Don't do it.
Can I just say something, Jude?
Sure.
No, now the thing is that I asked Iron Cross several times for the citations for this. Now, when I did so, I kind of dishonest, because even if he was right, let's grant for a moment he was right. I have no way of knowing that, because he could have been talking about anything in context. He could be talking about what milk he was ordering that day. He could be talking to a bunch of nuns. He could be talking to his dog. He could be talking to anybody. He could be writing to anybody. I don't know. So that's why citation is important. If you're the one giving the quote, then I'm not the one who should be having to do homework here. It's your responsibility, if you think that there is a case, to provide that for me.
Yeah, and to provide the original source, not a source that gives it as a source.
And that's the problem with these quotes. That's one of the problems with these quotes. And you have to remember, it says the popes write a lot of stuff. And I looked up, in looking up all these comments, I found a whole lot of stuff. There are encyclicals, papal encyclicals. There are apostolic letters, and there are just regular letters. So there are different degrees of importance to what a pope writes. I mean, a pope could be writing a letter to his sister, and you're not going to take that at the same measure of seriousness in regards to the church as you would a papal encyclical. So yeah, where these things come from are really important. Okay, let's go on to the second quote, because I've got them on. It says, Pope Pius IX said, God has committed to the Blessed Virgin Mary the treasury of all good things in order that everyone may know that through her are obtained every hope, every grace, and all salvation. Okay. And again, I personally don't have a problem with this. And I did find this. This comes from Ubi Primum on the Immaculate Conception, the encyclical of Pope Pius IX, February 2nd, 1849. Now, this is really interesting, because what this is about, what was I going to look? What this is about is in this encyclical, what the Pope is doing. And let me give you the end of a part of the encyclical. And remember, it's an encyclical. It's got a whole bunch of parts. You pull one quote out of it, and you don't understand. So at the end of the encyclical, he goes, accordingly, we have appointed certain priests of recognized piety and theological learning, as well as several cardinals of the Holy Roman Church, who are renowned because of their ability, piety, wisdom, prudence, and knowledge of the things of God. And we have directed them to make carefully and thoroughly a most diligent examination into the most important matter, and then provide us with a complete report. Through such a procedure, we feel that we are following in the clearly marked footsteps of our predecessors, and that we are emulating their example. What this is about is setting up a council to investigate the biblical validity of the Immaculate Conception. That's what it's about. And it's one quote out of a very long, well, a long encyclical, and it's a quote mine, basically, because it makes it sound like God is committed to the Blessed Virgin Mary, the treasury of all good things, in order that everyone may know that through her are obtained every hope, every grace, and all salvation. That's absolutely true. Through her are obtained every hope, every grace, and all salvation, because through her we got Jesus Christ. So you got to be careful when you take things out of context. Okay. Let's see. There was a quote saying that Pope Pius XII, which I'm not sure why he put that one in there, recognized the Holy Catholic Roman Church to be the only true Church of Jesus Christ, outside of which neither sanctity nor salvation can be found. Call them to the unity of the one folk, granting them Okay, we hear this a lot, and this goes back to a couple of things. First of all, the Church is the people of God. It's not just the Holy Roman Catholic Church. The other thing is that Catholics believe that without the Catholic Church did not exist, there would be no salvation for anyone. Doesn't mean you have to belong to the Catholic Church. Now, this is an interesting one. He says, God proclaims that salvation is by faith in Christ, not by works. This is from Ron. He uses, he says, the Roman Catholic Church declared at the Council of Trent, Canon 9, quote, if anyone says that the sinner is justified by faith alone, meaning that nothing else is required to cooperate, and in order to obtain the grace of justification, and that it is not in any way necessary that he be prepared and disposed by the action of his own will, let him be anathema, damned to hell. And the damned to hell, Ron or somebody else put in, that's not what anathema means. Okay, let's just start with that. Anathema does not mean damned to hell. It means being outside. Yes, it means being outside of the church, right, exactly. So that's not what it means. Just to begin with. So when you have someone insert something like that, and they insert it in parentheses, not in brackets. If you insert something in brackets, it means it's your opinion. If you insert it parentheses, it looks like it's part of the quote. That's a wrong thing to do. Okay.
Also, if I just might add something, even if you're declared anathema, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are in fact anathema.
Right.
To declare it, the reason why people excommunicate other members in the Catholic Church is to protect them and to protect the Eucharist. The Eucharist is supposed to be on a similar part of the Holy of Holies. It's something that when you approach it, you have to be in a very pure state, ready to confront it as if Jesus was in front of you in full glory. And of course, in doing this, you're supposed to protect non-believers by forbidding them to partake of it as well. So that's the reason why people excommunicate. It's partially to protect them, but it's partially to protect the host, and it's also partially to declare that what they're doing is wrong and that they should repent of it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you are, in fact, anathema, as God himself would understand it. There might be some, it could be because of ununderstood malice that you're not in the right position to see, things of that nature.
Right. But, oh, shut up, Freddie. I don't know if you heard that meow.
The cat.
Yeah, it's Freddie. The other thing I wanted to say is, again, this is, when you quote, you have to quote things properly. You noticed he said that this is Canon 9 from the Council of Trent. And one of the things I asked him, and I never got an answer, of course, which Canon 9 are you talking about? There are a whole bunch of Canon 9s in the Council of Trent. Okay? Because there were different sessions of the Council of Trent. And different sessions...
What is a Canon 9?
It's 4 after Babylon 5.
Yeah.
I don't know what a Canon 9 is, so...
Well, it's just a number. They're a list of canons. They're just a list of statements, basically. And they list them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever. So it's like statement number 9. The problem is there's a whole bunch of statement number 9s from the Council of Trent. A whole bunch of them. I know which one he's talking about, though. He's talking about the 6th session of the Council of Trent. There were a whole bunch of sessions of the Council of Trent. There are different canons in different sessions. So he's talking about the 6th session of the Council of Trent, and it's the Council on Justification. And there is a Canon 9. It is one of 33 canons. not only that, there's more to. There's also a statement that comes from the Council of Trent that is not part of the canons. So talk about a quote mine. You're going to pull one canon out of 33 because you like that one. Now, he did answer one thing on that. He said that the statement should stand on its own. You know, that's absurd. Because when you take something out of context, it's like saying, he didn't respond to me, or I would have said, okay, that's like saying I can take any verse out of the Bible and say it should stand on its own without context. It makes no sense. This is
I wonder what he'd think if I said that.
Right, this is a long session on justification, which came out with a statement from it and 33 canons. So you're going to pull one canon out of that, and because you don't like what it says, or you do like what it says because you're anti-Catholic, you're going to promulgate that one all over the internet, because trust me, Canon 9 from the Council of Trent is on every anti-Catholic, well, maybe not every, but on a lot of anti-Catholic websites. And I'm pretty sure most of those websites don't even know that there were more than one Canon 9, that there were 33 in that one session, which was the 6th session of I don't remember how many. So this is, even if you agree with the statement, it's still a bad quote. Don't use bad quotes.
It's the old story about if you find something that goes exactly what you want it to say, treat it with caution.
Cherry picking.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's another one. Oh, this is actually from a different comment thread. I don't think this is from this one. From a different one. I don't remember. I got some of Ron's comments confused. He said, Pope Leo XIII said, O Holy Mother of God, to thee we lift our prayers, for thou powerful and merciful art the mediatrix of our salvation. And, of course, Ron objects to this, as do a lot of other fundamentalist Christians, because there's only one mediator between man and God. Well, depends on what you mean by mediator.
Yeah.
And in this particular... Right, exactly. And in this particular quote, this is one line, and by the way, the original, of course, is in Latin. The original of all this stuff is in Latin, so we're, even when I could find the quotes, they're in Latin, although there are various translations. This is from part 8 of an 11-part encyclical. And the term mediatrix is explained earlier in the encyclical. And if you bothered to look the quote up and you bothered to read the encyclical, you would know what was meant by mediatrix. But that's too difficult. Let's grab a quote because it has the word mediatrix in it, and we know there's only one mediator between man and God, and we're going to use this to be anti-Catholic. So this is a quote mine. Not only that, let me make another point to you. Wait, where is it?
I got a question. Is that a prayer to Mary?
It's an intercession to Mary. So the difference between prayers and intercessions is this. One, a prayer is not only a communication, but it is also a form of worship and adoration. So along with the prayer, you are giving a form of adoration to God, signifying his role in the economy of reality, essentially, saying that he is the most supreme and all this. And of course, you're asking him directly by his own power. However, if you're asking for the intercession of the saints, you're asking them to petition God on your behalf and his use of his power on your behalf. It's no different than me going to Fiona or Becky or Gary and asking them, hey, would you mind praying for me? I really need this. And the reason we pray for one another and the reason we beseech the saints is because of the fact that we are a family of God and we act like it. And those who are dead aren't passed away. They are more alive because they are in the presence of God than we are.
Right.
Yep.
I'd also like to point out that quote is 2 sentences that were run together. Just to let you know.
Yeah.
There is a period in the middle there, and there is also more to the sentences. So again, quote mine. It's just, I'm not going to read the whole thing out, but yeah, it's 2 sentences run together. So again, and this is from 1894, by the way. If it really is a real quote. And here's another. If anyone want to say anything more about that, or I think I've got like one more. This last one I want to talk about, I think. Or maybe there were two, but this one mostly. Okay, Pope Benedict the 15th declared. This one I love. Oh, I love this one. Gary will probably remember me talking about this one. Pope Benedict the 15th declared, to such extent did Mary suffer and almost die with her suffering and dying son, to such extent did she surrender her maternal rights over her son for man's salvation, ... that we may rightly say she redeemed the human race together with Christ. Okay, now you notice that ... I think they mean that to be an ellipsis. An ellipsis, by the way, is 3 dots. For all of those of you who are bothering to quote mine, at least do it properly and use 3 dots, not 2. And now the thing is, I can't verify this. And I'll tell you why I can't verify this. This is from the Apostolic Letter Inter Sodalica from March 22nd, 1918. It is not online anywhere, and from everything I've been able to find, I found people talking about it. It has never been formally translated into English. Now, I say the word formally because that doesn't mean that somebody didn't casually translate it at some time, but it's never been translated to English that I know of. I can't say that it's never been translated in English because, again, somebody may have picked up the book and done it themselves. But I can't find any English translation, neither could anybody else that I found on the internet. Now, I thought, okay, I did find out where you can read it. It's in the Acta oh God, I know Latin and I can't even say it. Anyway, it's the Acts of the Apostolic See, Volume 10, pages 181 to 182, and which is abbreviated AAS. Well, you can't buy it because it doesn't exist. However, I looked in WorldCat. For those of you who don't know, WorldCat is a catalog, literally exactly it says, a worldwide catalog of what's in different libraries. So if you want to read something, you can go to WorldCat, you can plop it in, and you can find out what library it's at. Well, this particular version is it's not found at every library. Because the Acts of the Apostolic See are basically collections of all these writings of popes, and I don't know what all. I know it's Acts of the Apostolic See, so it would be all the writings coming from the Vatican that are all collected into these different volumes. Volume 10 is said from 1918. I don't know exactly what range Volume 10 covers, but so these aren't your casual library. For me to read this, I would have to go 33 miles over the mountains to the University of Santa Clara, or 42 miles over the mountains to the Stanford University. Ooh. And I would have to make arrangements to go see them because I'm a member of the public, these universities, and it would be in Latin. So and I had to search to find all this information. So, oh, that's very nice. Benedict, so in other words, you're using a quote from Benedict the 15th, allegedly using the quote, because I can't verify it, from an obscure letter. So obscure that the Vatican hasn't thought it necessary to translate it yet. And I'd like to point out that the Vatican, in conjunction with Oxford University, is currently putting everything in the Vatican Library online. So this is clearly, obviously an obscure letter from 1918 is not high on the list of being put online. So yeah, that's a really, really great. First of all, you got an ellipsis in the middle of this thing, or I'm assuming the 2 dots are an ellipsis, which means you've cut out part of what is being said. And then again, it's from some obscure letter in Latin that is not online. I did find a reference to where you might find an English translation, but I was not able to verify that either. So there. Again, okay, let's use really bad quotes. Yeah. Okay, let's use really bad quotes. Another thing that Ron said, everything wasn't about Mary. He said, oh, this one I love too. The Catechism removed God's second commandment, which forbids idol worship, and split the 10th commandment into 2 to fill the gap. And the part that he's saying is left out is you shall not make idols for yourselves. Okay, no, it didn't remove it. The Catholic Church follows the division used by St. Augustine, which puts graven images as part of the first commandment. There are 3 parts to the first commandment. The one is, I am the Lord thy God. The second is, thou shalt have no gods before me. The third part is, thou shalt not make any graven images. The Catholic Church just put those 3 together in the first commandment. And we followed, and this is the pattern followed by St. Augustine. Now, the Orthodox churches followed the pattern in the oh God, I can't talk today. The Septuagint, which splits that into 2 commandments. The thing is, it's not a big deal. The 10 Commandments has all the stuff in there. It's just partitioned differently. And if you look at the Bible, they don't number them. Okay? So the way you put them together is not that important. It's still in there. It's just part of the first commandment. But not only that, the Western Church, the Christian Church, used this version, the St. Augustine's version, or, well, the Catholic Church is slightly different, but it takes it from St. Augustine, used this church up until Calvin. It's Calvin who changed the Western tradition to a version closer to the Septuagint, which splits the first commandment into 2. So no, the Catholic Church did not eradicate the thou shalt not, you shouldn't have graven idols because the Catholic Church worships graven idols. No, there's just a different differentiation of how the parts are put together. Graven idols is in there. I learned that when I was a little kid. It's just part of the first commandment.
And you'll find that information on a basic Wikipedia article as well.
Not only
Yes.
that, but the Catholic Church doesn't have graven idols. If anyone actually looks at the background of that, the pagans and idol worshippers in ancient Judaism used to use these things and worship them. Literally, they were used as a way to worship these other foreign gods, and that was what made them wrong. It wasn't the fact that they were images. It was the fact that they were images made of foreign gods and meant to worship and emulate foreign gods. However,
Right.
if you look at how they're used in the Christian tradition, they're actually used as pictures, more or less, of actual saints and of course of Christ, who took up a human body. This was actually, I forget, it was the Seventh Council. It had Saint John of Damascus was actually the head of it, and he made this fantastic point. God incarnated himself into human form, and that's why we can make images of Jesus Christ, and they work like pictures. They help us, and of course we have statues as well. They work to remind us of our family members, the ones we love. I mean, I come from a Mediterranean tradition where it's uncommon to kiss pictures of your relatives. Even Paul was greeted with kisses when he went to one of the churches. Now, granted, I wouldn't be down for that myself because it would make me feel uncomfortable as a Western male, but still, it's very common in that tradition.
It's very common all over the world. The Japanese do this for their shrines. The family shrine in your home kind of thing. One of the other things as well, the Ten Commandments thing. When Moses goes up the hill to get the Ten Commandments, when he comes down, he finds them praying to these other gods, this other god with a graven image. The reason why he got annoyed is because, the way the system worked in that part of the world was that you effectively had a god that was in charge of the land where you were. So it's almost like a bit like paying paying a tithe, shall we say, to the mayor of the town in which you're in, for coverage, for whatever, okay, for whatever you get out of that town. So yeah, it's a tax. So the idea is that as you move from one place to another, you pray for the god that's in charge of that land, in the same way as the Greeks had, Poseidon for the god of the sea, and the soldiers might pray to Mars, god of war. So things of that nature. So effectively, the Old Testament, to make it simple, is the transition from a multi-god system to a single god system. That God being Yahweh. Because of course, why would it have You shall have no other gods, if there aren't any other gods. That's my personal take on it. But anyway, so one of the things, sorry, don't matter. One of the things that Ironcross says, I've got the text of it here, and it's when people bow their head and they say prayers for dead saints to pray for them, is that praying for the dead? And
No.
if they bow and they say Hail Mary, is that praying to the dead, meaning Mary?
No. I'll explain why. Okay, if you let's see, Cliff, have you got any members of your family who fought in World War One or World War Two?
Yes.
Okay, are they people that are remembered fondly by your family as important, or so that the sacrifice they made were important in your family's legacy?
Yeah, I mean, there's a great granddad, but I never knew him. But
Okay.
yeah, he was a desert rat in North Africa.
Okay, but that's exactly what this is. It's basically people pay reverence to people who had extraordinary lives. It's not worshipping. It's remembering the things they did while they were alive. Now, for example,
so we're paying homage. You're saying
Huh?
you're paying homage to their lives.
Yeah, like for example, there's certain saints, for example, who did died under horrific circumstances to keep the faith alive, like people like people who were wrong when the Romans were in charge or whoever, and they went against that. There are other saints who did altruistic works actually, sometimes converts become saints. Again, there's not one way just to become a saint. What you have to do is try and embody the faith. Now, there's actually a very famous, I think it's Saint, I think it's in Ilbad of Trilo, I think it was. What it was, he was like a Roman consulate or something, and he was seeing over this war, and there's a break, and these guys came up and started to save him. Now, he didn't know who these guys were. He just went up to them and said, what are you guys doing? He says, we're just helping them out. He said, which side are you from? He said, neither. He said, well, what are you doing then? He said, we're just Christians. He said, we're just helping out because that's what we're called to do. He said, what's a Christian? And they basically explained it to him, and he ended up being a Christian saint. Now, that's somebody off the top of my head I can think about. But that is what sainthood is about. And it's the same thing with Mary, that she was the mother of God on earth, apparently. And that she had found favour because she was this good, wholesome person. And that's what's being remembered and revered. It isn't the person, it's the example she set for females. Now, you've got to remember that there isn't that many strong female people that women in the church can take on as somebody to be like. Jesus is held up as being what humans should be like, or man should be like. However, there's not a woman, and that's why Mary's important in that sort of sense. Is that right, Fiona, or have I got some of that wrong?
Yeah. I think if once you become a mother yourself, you realise the sacrifice that Mary made.
So this sounds a lot to me like it's almost like the Ode of Remembrance, if you know the one I'm talking about. It's the one they say on Remembrance Sunday. To sort of first of the 11th day, 11th hour, 11th day, 11th month. Mm-hmm. And there's a stanza in there, and it's they shall grow not old, as that we left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning we remember them. Yeah.
Yeah, as I said, I think if you're a mum, you understand the sacrifice that Mary made, and she made willingly. her firstborn. And she accepted that before he was born. And she did that because Jesus was going to be the salvation of all mankind. So she agreed to do that for the sake of us. That is, as I say, if you're a mum, you understand the magnitude of that. The other thing I wanted to bring up is a really small point that turned into a long and protracted discussion, and that is the use of the word hail. Now, I think we'll all be familiar with the phrase, hail fellow, well met. We'll also have heard the word being used, he hailed him from a distance. And we also know of certain people that wander about the streets with loud hailers. And it's just a word that means calling out to, hello, that's it, it's a greeting. I was informed that the word hail proves that you're saying a prayer to Mary. When you say Hail Mary, that is worship. Hail proves you're worshipping Mary. I was gobsmacked at that.
Yeah.
Because that just shows complete ignorance of English. Remember, we're talking about English here. Hail.
It also shows a really, really lack of understanding in terms of the scriptures, because scriptures say in Luke 1:28, the angel went, Gabriel appeared to her and said, "Greetings, favored woman, the Lord is with you." Greetings or hail is what it means. Here's the King James version. And the angel came in onto her and said, "Hail, thou that art highly favored, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women." King James version. Just saying.
Yeah.
That's the version that God himself.
And the point of that is that what you're actually saying, all you're doing is you're actually basically quoting the Bible. Now, the argument's been made, yes, well, it made sense for the angel to say hello to Mary because the angel was talking to Mary because Mary was alive. But it doesn't make sense for you to say it because she's dead. Does that mean we can no longer take any quote from the Bible where someone is speaking to a dead person? I mean, given that everybody who was in the Bible is now dead.
Well, it was that troubled me. Okay, sorry, Maximus. I'm just going to say something, right? Because in Christian theology, I mean, as far as I know, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't dead souls supposed to go to heaven? I mean, in the presence of God, therefore not be actually dead.
Well, that's what I would have thought everlasting life was. But the argument is being made that they won't go there until after the final judgment, after the end times. That seems to be the argument being made. So everybody stays dead until then. But
may I just read? No, go right ahead.
But I mean, it does say that whosoever believes in Jesus shall not perish, but shall have everlasting life. Perish meaning shall not die.
If I just might read something from Revelations 8:3. Another angel who had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all of God's people on the golden altar in front of the throne. The smoke of the incense together with the prayers of God's people went up before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, hurled it on the earth, and there came pearls of thunder, rambling flesh, and lightning and earthquake. The angel right here is actually is actually being given the prayers of God's people. This angel is acting as an intercessor and providing them on to God and presenting to God as a form of incense. Likewise, the saints are also in heaven as well. So saints can offer saints both who are living on earth and with God, and the angels themselves can also give prayers to God. Further, if you look at the Psalms, David beseeches the saints or the hosts in heaven to give praises to God, the angels. Likewise, human beings taken on to death are in the realm of the angels as well. So there's really nothing that I can see that's contrary to what the Bible is saying.
Well, exactly. I was asked to give biblical support for that. The saints, etc., can offer your prayers to God, present them to God, and I quoted that back, and I was told it was irrelevant. Well, I wasn't told it was irrelevant. I was asked. Oh, Gary, you were there in the thread at the time.
Yeah.
And
if I could also read one more thing, and this is one I like to use. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. So over here we have a cloud of witnesses. Now, if people are dead, and to quote G-Man here, they can't hear you, I would think that being a witness would mean that people can hear you, and especially if there are a cloud of witnesses in heaven. So considering this verse, the one I quoted in Revelations, I see quite a bit of biblical support for this doctrine.
What Ron said to you, Fiona, sorry, I'll let Miss Smith go. He basically said that the scripture you gave wasn't relevant to the point you were making, which was untrue, because the point you were making was actually the one that he was actually trying to get you to answer.
Yeah, he asked me for a biblical reference, a scriptural reference, for the idea that the saints can pray for us or can present our prayers to God. And that's what I supplied, and then demanded an explanation as to how that answered his question. Which, I mean, well, what can you say to that, really?
This is what I would say in response. Well, it's good to know you don't accept the authority of Scripture. I'm glad your bigotry is coming from another place entirely. Like, that's how I would respond.
I think I was more interested in trying to enlighten him, because what kicked all of this off was his initial comment, which was that as a Roman Catholic, I believe that the only way, excuse me a minute, cat! The only way to get to heaven is through the Roman Catholic Church. You have to be a Roman Catholic. And I said, no. At which point he declared that I'm not even a Roman Catholic, because I am not accepting the doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church, that you have to be a Roman Catholic.
Don't Catholics believe in temporal dispensation?
Sorry?
Don't Catholics accept temporal dispensation?
I'm sure they do.
It makes me think that since he has this idea of, you know, you're not a proper Christian, so you're not saved, I'm saved. Maybe he's looking at Catholicism in the same kind of way. You basically, he's putting his mindset in, as in Catholics are saying that unless you're a Catholic, you're not proper Christian, you're not saved, you know, that kind of thing, which is not, as your opening started, the universalist type idea.
The Catholic Church actually teaches that from what I remember, the Catholic Church teaches that those who are going to heaven are the ones who don't have any are the ones that are brought into the Christian covenant, first and foremost, and the second thing is that they haven't committed any mortal sins before their death. Mortal sins would include, for example, committing apostasy, would be crimes or sins you have knowledge of doing before enacting on them. And then, of course, one of them would be knowingly leaving the Catholic Church. That would be an example of a mortal sin. However, with regards to as I was saying, regarding Protestants, a Protestant can be saved because a Protestant is brought into the church through faith and baptism as the entrance into the covenant, and from there on in, they can be considered saved. They're what's called separated brethren. The Catholic Church actually has a specific term, separated brethren. And yeah, as long as you're in the covenant, you're fine.
Yeah.
You might not have the fullness of being in communion with the Catholic Church, and it's kind of secondary, but at the same time, there is no challenge to your salvation there. What does challenge your salvation is mortal sin, but that's something you could, in theory, find forgiveness, and even when you're in the church, through repentance and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think the problem is that we had, now that we know, we had 2 Roman Catholics in that thread telling him what the doctrine of the church was, and he was declaring no, that wasn't the doctrine of the church.
You didn't know what the doctrine was.
Sorry?
He said that you didn't know what the doctrine was. You went on to, I'm going to use a term now that I don't use. You went on to conspiracy theory nutsiness, saying that, oh, well, you don't understand the false doctrines of the church. Well, I actually asked him what these doctrines are, which included, was it the whole thing about praying to Mary, which I told him several times that Catholics don't do.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that this is very easy to see from church history, which I know for a fact Ron hasn't read, because people have been excommunicated for it.
Yes. Mary Ogletree is seen as quite serious.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the thing is that I actually told him this, and he keeps on denying it. I said, if you actually Google Mariology in the church, or the Pope's reaction to it, you'd see that it isn't just a slap on the wrist. It was like, no, you get out of here now, and you never darken our doors again. And I think that's the thing that annoyed me.
Yeah, you have to remember.
Because I was a Catholic, apparently I can't know these things. But again, it's because I've read church history.
Yeah, but apparently Catholics can't know either, according to him. Mariology, that's fine. Yeah. That is the academic study of Mary. It's Mariolatry that's the problem. That's idolizing Mary. Idolatry.
And even Protestants have a study of Mariology. In fact, the famous Swiss theologian Karl Barth, for example, even wrote a treatise on Mary, which was kind of unheard of at his time because that's something Protestants usually shied away from. But no, he did. In fact, he had quite good counsel with Hans Urs von Balthasar, who was a Catholic theologian, and they had kind of a friendship going on. Funny story, one time the Pope praised Karl Barth's work, and Barth responded by saying, "Oh, I guess the Pope is infallible."
Well, I'd like to counter that by a comment made by Cardinal Gibbons. Somebody asked Cardinal Gibbons, who was a cardinal long ago, if he felt that the Pope was infallible, and Cardinal Gibbons looked at the fellow and says, "Well, I don't know about that. Every time he talks to me, he calls me Gibbons." But yeah, of course, infallible is only ex cathedra, and
yeah,
I'd also like to point out that when you're talking about the word hail, in the Latin it's Ave. It's Ave Maria, where I think everyone's familiar with the song Ave Maria. I will forbear for singing it for you, but although I am a dramatic soprano, but no, this microphone wouldn't handle that. Ave, for anyone who has studied Latin, is hail. Ave!
Yeah.
So to try to say that hail is a prayer is going to come as a real shock to anyone who studied Latin or anybody who's read anything in Latin. Ave, it's the vocative.
Yes.
It's hello.
Yes.
So the other thing I'd like to point out is I put a quote in here that from a place I like. It's called Ask a Franciscan, where they asked if non-Christians can go to heaven. And he says, in the dogmatic constitution on the Church, paragraph 16, the Vatican II Council Fathers wrote, those who have not yet received the gospel are related to the people of God in various ways. There is, first, that people to which the covenants and promises were made, and from which Christ was born according to the flesh. They cite Romans 9:4-5. In view of the divine choice, they are a people most dear for the sake of the fathers, for the gifts of the God or without repentance. Romans 11:28 to verse 29 are referenced. And then it says, but the plan of salvation also includes those who acknowledge the Creator in the first place, amongst whom are the Muslims. Those profess to hold the faith of Abraham, and together with us they adore the one merciful God, mankind's judge on the last day. Nor is God remote from those who in shadows and images seek the unknown God, since he gives to all men life and breath and all things. And the reference here is Acts 17, verses 25-28. And since the Savior wills all men to be saved, this is from Timothy 2, verse 4, those who through no fault of their own do not know the gospel of Christ or his church, but who nevertheless seek God with a sincere heart, and moved by grace try in their actions to do his will as they know it through dictates of their conscience, those too may achieve eternal salvation. Nor shall divine providence deny the assistance necessary for salvation to those who, without any fault of theirs, have not yet arrived at an explicit knowledge of God. Think atheists in here, folks. That was my comment, not the Vatican II. And who, not without grace, strive to lead a good life. So the fathers to the council do not exclude anyone acting in good faith. Yeah, this is from Vatican II. So
that's
this
a good
is
while ago.
from a very important document.
Yep, that's what, 70s?
60s. Late
60s.
60s.
Late
I
60s.
remember it.
As
I was alive during Vatican II and in Catholic school, and it was a very exciting time for the church, let me tell you. It was so cool. Unfortunately, there are some unregenerate fundamentalists in the church who reject all this, and they think that the popes, before then are okay, but after then we're not, because they reject Vatican II. But no, this is, when Pope Francis talked about could atheists go to heaven, this is what he's talking about.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say was that the arguments I'm hearing regurgitated in the last couple of weeks, I think I mentioned in my video that I've heard these arguments before. And I heard them from the mouth of the late Reverend Ian Paisley, who was a sectarian bigot from Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Now, I grew up, I was brought up as a Protestant. And even being brought up as a Protestant, I could see that this man was an anti-Catholic bigot because of the language that he used and because of the ignorance that he spewed. It was a case of any port in a storm. He would go with whatever he could think up to try and use against the Roman Catholic Church. So even as a Protestant, I didn't like what he was doing.
He was one of the reasons why the peace process took such a long time.
Oh yeah.
More than that, it was because of him that the Troubles reignited in 1969.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the thing, Fiona, and you'll love this. Apparently, infant baptism is a satanic practice that the Roman Catholic Church does.
I was baptised as a child in the Protestant church.
I know. I tried to tell Rod this. I was older. I think I was 9 months old when I was baptised. But that's because they were waiting for the final paperwork to be finished on the adoption. But infant baptism is done in the Protestant church as well. Well, have you not seen the videos he's been putting up about it? Well, he's been sharing. It's like saying,
See that again?
the videos that Ron's been sharing about it. It's like
I do know that there are many people who say that you can't make the decision until you're an adult, and within the Church of Scotland, you're baptised as an infant, but it's only once you're over 18 that you actually will make the decision to become a communicant of the church. Even if you've attended it all your life, you make that decision as an adult, and you have to go through the new communicants classes and all sorts. And this is Church of Scotland. This is Protestant.
There's an important reason why they have baptism at such a young age, is because infant mortality was so high.
Yeah.
In the past. I mean, I remember just over a year ago, I went to Haworth. You know, you've heard of the Brontes of Haworth?
Mm-hmm.
And around the back of the house kind of thing is a churchyard. And sort of my friend wanted to see the stone that's there for them. But I'm looking around and I'm seeing, sort of just this one. I've got a picture of it somewhere, and it's just this one plinth there, and it's just got. I think it's got like about 12 children, all died, and it's like age 3 or the 3rd year of their age, the 9th year of their age, the 12th year of their age, the 7th year of their age.
Yeah.
So just name after name after name after name, and you think, what tragedy that family must have gone through with every one of those child. I mean, you listen to Darwin and what happened to him when his kid died.
Yeah.
Imagine 12, 13, I can't remember how many it was now. It was just so many.
Yeah, that was measles, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And there was somebody else lost a child to measles. I'm trying to think who it was.
Yeah, well, as I said, infant mortality was very high. But again, if baptism is something that wasn't because of that, it happened in a Jewish society that Christianity came from.
Yeah, the children were circumcised at 8 days old.
Yeah,
So boys.
and they were given ritual baths as well. So,
yes.
So that is something. But the biggest thing that I want to address is this whole thing that. Well, the whole false doctrines, and I kept on asking, like, what, for example, and he said, oh, stuff like the papacy is something that he has a problem with, and he came up with the quote that that Jay talked about from Malachi something or other.
Maccabees.
Malachi Martin, sorry. I just have to look at
sorry, Malachi Martin, right.
Yeah, Malachi Martin, the priest who's sort of not.
Yeah.
Yeah, Malachi Martin was a priest. He left the priesthood, he became a journalist, and he became rather anti-Catholic. He wrote a lot of novels that were conspiracy-ish, and he tended to appear on talk shows of the, well, and this was a long time ago, but let's just say where they were of the Alex Jones type. You know what I mean? Extremist kind of type. Malachi Martin purported to know a lot of inside things about the church, and yeah, he was very educated. If you look at his CV, you'll see he was very educated. He taught at the Vatican, and so on and so forth. But one of the things that a lot of I've seen Protestants bring up is they will say, or certain fundamentalists, and again, not all fundamentalists. When we say fundamentalist here on YouTube, we tend to be referring to a certain group of people. Mm-hmm. I have met fundamentalists in real life who are absolutely nothing like these people. Mm-hmm. They hold to the fundamentals of Christianity, but they don't purport to know the truth. They say that everybody else is going to hell. They have the common sense to realize only God can do that. But so they like to point out that Malachi Martin was an intimate of what Pope John Paul the second, I believe. Yeah, second. Yeah, John Paul first wasn't around long. The problem is Malachi Martin left the church decades before. Well, not essentially left the church decades before. And he's no more reliable than the woman whose name I can't remember, that you see pop up in various Protestant, again, certain fundamentalist things. I have to qualify it, because please, I do not want... There's a nun. There's this supposed nun who wrote this expose of the Catholic Church, who did speeches all over the country. I spent some time going through what she said. The problem is, okay, when I was about 2 or 3, well, maybe a little more, maybe it was 3 or 4, we went to Mass, and at that time, our church hadn't been built, because like a lot of Catholic communities, we built a school first. School is more important. School was built first, church was built second. And we held church services at the Belmont Theater in Long Beach, in Belmont Shore. And I can remember being there and having Mother Superior from the school come up and talk to my parents. And she looked at me with this big beaming smile. She was a wonderful woman. And said, "So this is Jade." And I was, like a little kid, really embarrassed. She says, "Well, we can't wait to have you in school. We're so looking forward to you." I felt so wonderful, just absolutely wonderful. But so I've been around nuns since then, and I've known a lot of them personally, and I've known what they've gone through. When I was in high school, some of the nuns I was taught by were incredibly brilliant. Some of them came from really wealthy families. I remember my nun, the nun who taught me advanced placement English in high school. This woman had, to my knowledge, I mean, she may have had more degrees, but I know she had 3 master's degrees. 1 in theology, 1 in biology, 1 in English. She was freaking brilliant. She came from a wealthy ranching family, I think in Montana, maybe in Wyoming. We asked her once what the one thing that she regretted, if there was one thing she regretted in becoming a nun. You know what the one thing she said? She missed her horses.
Oh.
I would like to point out, however, that this order of nuns has a college in Indiana where they have horses, and they actually teach. You can minor in, I can't think of the right name, but it's basically therapy using horses.
All right.
So, yeah. Another nun I was taught by came from a very wealthy, influential family in Chicago. But we didn't, they didn't tell us this stuff, okay? We had people who did volunteer work in the office, and when the nuns weren't looking, they'd look stuff up, because we're curious. What are nuns like? And when I found out about them, I got a greater appreciation for who they were. Has anyone here ever seen the movie, what is it, The Trouble with Angels?
Yes. Haley Mills.
Right, Haley Mills? Okay, that was based on a book by Jane Trahey called Life of the Mother Superior. You remember the character Haley Mills played?
Mm-hmm.
The character who always got in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
And yet at the end joined the convent?
Mm.
She was my religion and homeroom teacher junior year.
Oh.
That's a true story.
Wow.
That is a true story.
I actually thought it was just a movie. I didn't think there was any truth in it.
Oh, it was a book before. The book is fantastic. It's called Life of the Mother Superior. It's hilarious. But it's they changed things a bit, for the movie, of course, because you always do. So this woman, and of course, we would always ask the nuns questions because we were curious. Kids would always ask, "So what's it like when you become a nun?" And to be a nun, you have to be a postulant for about a year. And during this year, you go through a lot of training. You go through a lot of theological studies and what have you. And then when, sometimes 2 years, 1 or 2 years as a postulant. And then you take your temporary vows, in which you're a nun for about 5 years. And again, during that time, you go to school, because they send you to school where there was a mother house to an order of Sisters of St. Joseph in Orange, where I used to live, and they had their own college there. And I think they had students who weren't nuns as well, and they taught the nuns, the young nuns, how to teach, and not only that, they were also a medical order, so they had a nursing school. I'm correct. I may be a little vague on, you know, how much they, but so they would send you to school. So you spend 6 to 7 years in the convent, and you can spend more. If you're not ready for your final vows, you can say, I need a little more time. So you spend 6 to 7 years as a nun before you take your final vows. But even then, if later on you decide, this isn't for me, you could ask to be released from your vows, and it's usually granted without any problem. So you have this woman who went around, traveling around, talking about all these horrible things that happened in the convent. The first time
I've got her name, Mr. Charlotte.
Yeah, the first time I encountered her, and I'm listening to what she's talking about, I was just gobsmacked, to use a British term, because it's clear to me she's never been near a convent in her life. Not only that, people who have investigated her story have pointed out that it doesn't match anything in reality. It's pretty clear to me that this woman found a way to make a living. And she went around giving speeches from place to place, telling lies about the Catholic Church. Now, whether she was ever a nun or not, I don't know. But her story about her early years and her don't match anything. I mean, one of the simplest things is she said she was in a, I forget exactly how the number, but she was in a convent with like 125 or whatever postulates, and there was no such place. So you have to take these people with a grain of salt, whatever point of view they have. If someone were to come to me and say they went to, well, G-Man doesn't go to a church, but someone's church, a lot of these people don't go to churches, Ron's church or somebody like that, and they were to come to me and they were to say, oh, look at these horrible things about this church, all these things, and I can tell you, I have a witness here that can tell you all this. I'm sorry, but one witness doesn't work. Years ago, you've heard of Chick tracts. Jack Chick. Right. Well, not only that, Jack Chick has sort of a pet Jesuit, a guy who supposedly knows all the insides of the Jesuits and told them all this stuff.
Alberto Riviera.
Yes. Okay. Well, nobody can verify anything he said. Not only that, many years ago, back in I think the 80s, the Catholic Church in the San Diego diocese actually sued Jack Chick and won because Jack Chick was lying. Now that didn't change what Jack Chick did; it just changed the way he did it. Unfortunately, if anyone is asking me for references to that, I can't give them to you because basically pretty much everything past about 1984 doesn't exist on the internet. So sorry about that. You're going to have to go by my memory. But the point is, this guy, Rivera, you can't prove. There are always going to be people like this. There are always going to be people who are going to tell you that the Chamber of Commerce is satanic. That the Elks Club is filled with pedophiles, which it's not. My dad was a member of the Elks Club. He was in the Elks Club choir. I spent a lot of my youth in the Elks Club places. It was really cool. We'd go swimming and all that kind of stuff. Never, ever remotely met anyone who treated me improperly. But that doesn't mean that someone couldn't come forward and say that, because there's always that one person who wants attention, or who has some mental problem, or who has a personal grudge against someone that's going to say something. So you cannot build an argument on one person. You can't build an argument on Sister Charlotte. You can't build an argument on Father Rivera. You can't build an argument on Malachi Martin. But people do that. Basically, that's all I have to say about that. But yeah, Martin is not a reliable source. Oops.
There was something else I wanted to touch on as well, and I forgot what
I can't remember what else he talked to me about. He gave me a lot of quotes about how the Catholic Church conflicts with Scripture.
That's going to be fun.
It was he gave me axe. Oh, sorry, that's Jeter. I'm trying to find the stuff he gave me. I do apologise about this.
I'm trying to remember what I wanted to bring up.
Go on.
While Gary is looking that up, I would like to say one thing about that. One of the problems we often see, and this is what poor Gary has encountered so many times, is when people take a single verse out of Scripture, completely out of context, take it out, not only out of the passage, but out of the entire section of the Bible, as some people have done with parts of all things, the Sermon on the Mount, which is an entire thing. I mean, you have to take it from beginning to end to understand it, and yet people will pull one verse out. You cannot pull one verse out and make an argument against that one verse, just like you can't. And we see this a lot. Let's look at the verse in context. I've seen Gary in hangout after hangout after hangout with some of our fundamentalist friends, and they will throw one verse at him. And Gary will say, well, let's look at it in context, but they won't let him answer. They do a gish gallop through the Bible.
Yes.
A couple of times I actually went back and wrote down every reference that they threw at Gary. It was at 2 different hangouts I did this. And one of the things I noticed that was very interesting is that very few, in one case only one of the references was from Jesus. All the other references were from the Old Testament, Revelation, or Paul.
I always find it amazing when Bundy's use Paul to trump Jesus.
Yes. I've come across that a few times.
Well, I think, I actually don't think that there's anything Paul and Jesus said that's incompatible with one another, personally.
It's the way they interpret what Paul said goes against what Jesus actually said. I think that's more what they're doing. I've found that quite a few times. That when you have the straightforward words of Jesus, then you have something from one of Paul's letters, which is specifically to a certain church or a certain person. And they try to make it into a sort of a universal instruction. And the way they interpret it actually goes against what Jesus himself had taught. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
I
and
found
of course,
that very often.
and again, they're pulling one verse from Paul out of context.
Yeah. Because
Context is
getting
important.
who it's written to and why.
Exactly.
I think this all comes down to tribalism. And it means that they are, well, it was a comment that Ron had made that made me think about this. And he said that you can tell who is a Christian by the love they have for their Christian brethren. Didn't say anything about sistering. And I thought, no, you're supposed to love everybody.
Well, Phil, the thing that you tend to get, and I was hoping that you would hopefully address it here, and if you don't want to, that's fine, is when people like G-Man and Rod say that you're in hangouts with atheists and you don't confront them when they say stuff against Jesus and God. Now, the thing is that I know that not to be true, because I have seen you do that.
Mm-hmm.
I have.
Yeah. See, this is the thing. They seem to be using a different YouTube from the one I use, because I've been able to. I mean, I don't think Ron had ever actually watched any of my videos, but he was happy to say he'd never seen me do X, Y, or Z, even although they were actually videos on it on my channel. But he'd never seen me doing it, therefore I had never done it. G-Man is the same. He's never seen me do it, therefore I haven't done it. The problem with that is that G-Man's now been corrected, but he still keeps saying it.
Yeah.
And I even had an instance where somebody said to me, "You never do X." And I've said to them, did you see the video, blah, blah. Yes, I saw the video. Did you see me doing X in that video? Yes. Then how can you say I never do X? Well, because you never do. What? And they actually argued that point. You never do it. Even though they said they seen me do it. And I thought, there's a disconnect here. They've made up their mind that I never do it, and therefore if I do, they don't see it.
Selective memory, not even that.
Or selective viewing.
Yeah.
Well, Jade wants to talk about something, so I think we should open up the floor for her. Jade.
Oh, well, it wasn't that big a deal, but as Fiona was talking, I was reminded of how some people point out that they say, well, if you're a Christian, you would shout it from the rooftops. So you can't be a real Christian because you're not shouting it from the rooftops. And they use this against Fiona. And I'm quite sure they're going to
mischaracterize?
probably use it against me now. The thing is that there are different ways of communicating. Okay. And if the choice I have made here on YouTube is the wrong choice, it's still my choice, and it was made with consideration and not casually. Because I have always believed, as is credited to Saint Francis, that you should preach the gospel always, and if necessary, use words.
Well, Jade, I'm gonna. You may think of attacking you, but I'm not. But I'm gonna put it this way. I've known about this truth about Jade for a while, and something I've said to her in private, and now I'll say in public, is that I think it's important that she does be a devout Christian, because there are a lot of LGBT Christians out there who don't think that their faith can be reconciled with certain people's just a couple of other things there, attitude towards them as homosexuals, especially homosexuals in the church. Now, as somebody who is a out lesbian, I think you have an important role in that sort of sense.
Right. I agree with you. And by the way, I also want to say something about Gary. I know that there are a lot of people who say, from the really ultra-conservative fundamentalist end, say bad things about Gary. But you should know that before Gary knew my position, as a matter of fact, what prompted me to tell Gary my position is that we're in a Skype group together, and Gary would very gently ask, say, Jade, I'd like to talk to you about Christianity. So he was, and not just me, someone else who, and then the two of us, finally had to go to Gary and say, there was just a little meeting, and we said, should we tell him? Yeah, we'll tell him. So we got Gary into a Skype chat and said, Gary, I'm a Christian. So, Gary does try to talk to people about Christ and about Christianity behind the scenes. I just want to tell some of the fundamentalists that if you think that Gary doesn't do anything. My point of view has been to try to, without stating my position, just make comments that I think are accurate. The other day I saw there was a hangout, and I pointed out that the standard that was being used for Scripture was so strict that it would basically exclude all of ancient history. And we see this a lot because people have this bias against Christianity, and some of them because for very good reasons, honestly. The way Christianity, the way some people have been taught as children, when you are taught that you are worthless, that you are scum, that, what a horrible thing. I can't imagine teaching children that. I certainly wasn't taught that in the church. Yes, we are imperfect. Yes, we are sinners, but that just means falling short of the glory of God. But we're also God's glorious creation.
Yeah, that's
And
something
we
I'd
should,
like to mention. Can I ask
yeah,
you about this? Because if we are such scum, if we are such horrible people, and God can't stand the sight of our sin, which is why He sent Jesus, then why does it say, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son?
yeah.
Well,
To raise children to think that they are like used gum on the bottom of someone's shoes
Yeah.
is, as far as I'm concerned, child abuse.
You know, a sparrow falls from the sky, but God doesn't know about it. How much more does He think of you? That's paraphrasing.
Yeah, I know.
And that's why I find this. Yes, none of us are perfect, and in recognizing that, you're certainly more than halfway there. When you recognise that you make mistakes, it doesn't mean, I'm not going to use the word sin because it does carry religious connotations.
Yeah, I know.
An atheist is able to know when they've done something that they shouldn't have done because of their own internal moral compass. And that's something that gets ignored. We keep hearing about how can you know it's wrong if you're an atheist. And yet, we forget that we have a moral compass.
yeah.
And I'd like,
And it's called empathy. If you don't want it done to you, don't do it to somebody else. The golden rule.
yeah.
I mean, it's in the Bible, but that doesn't mean that atheists don't actually follow that golden rule. They do, other than the psychotic, psychopathic ones, and that would go for Christians as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
They do have that internal moral compass.
well, the thing is, Fiona, is that I'm going to say something now, and I know I'm going to get hatred for it, but it's true. They don't follow Jesus; they follow Paul.
Yeah.
The reason why you see them put up something by Romans or something from Galatians or something from Corinthians or something like that, because if they go to Jesus, it doesn't exactly fit in with the way that they look at the world. The fact that they have to tell homosexuals, well, you're being sinful, or the way that they have to tell atheists, well, you're going to hell and stuff like that. If they look to Jesus for that thing, it isn't there.
Yeah.
But partly you can see that sort of thing in Paul, even though if you read Paul properly, he doesn't actually condone that either.
Mm-hmm.
There is an
Right.
awful lot of super Calvinistic, ever sinning expialidociousness that goes on in this in this community.
And like Fiona, I do not like to use the word sin because it has so much baggage with it.
Mm.
You know, because there are a lot of people who have been just beat over the head with the concept of sin. And I think that's just, as I said, I think that's a horrible thing to do. Even though the technical, Pastor Mike, Rational Roundtable, points out that sin is just simply, he points out that to him, sin is simply falling short of the example of Jesus, which is technically what it is. The problem is that the way it's used in society is just to abuse people, really.
Mm-hmm.
And to think of, how many times have you heard fundies say we are filthy rags? What a horrible, horrible thing to teach people, to teach children, because that is just disgusting. Again, the point of view I was taught is we are God's highest glory, greatest creation, and we need to act like it. And I see a lot of not acting like it here on YouTube. The other thing I want to bring up is you're talking about empathy. Studies have been done on the Baby Lab. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the work done at the Baby Lab. and they're doing studies on babies who are so young that they're, they haven't learned a lot of social patterns yet. And one of the things they've noticed is, guess what? Empathy is inherent.
Mm-hmm.
We're born with it. And if you want to look at it from an atheistic point of view, or even from mine, because as I said, I believe in evolution. I think that's the way. I think Fiona put it right once. She said God put the touch paper to the whole thing and started it all off. And to me, that's more glorious, far more glorious and fantastic than the fundamentalist, young Earth creationism. To me, that's a small God that just snapped his fingers and made everything happen. The God I believe in made this incredible magnificence that follows along the lines of evolution and so on. But, crap, I lost my place a little bit. But
the thing that you see on YouTube is a lot of hatred and things like that.
Yeah, it's just so much hatred, and so it's like, rather than coming to an understanding, not accepting each other's points of view, but just understanding, we see people taking a really obstinate, uncompromising, and I might say prideful stance. I mean, I'm more than willing to engage in discussion with anyone, but I'm not going to suffer attacks, because I don't have to. And I'm not an unintelligent human being. I'm not an uninformed human being. And I constantly challenge my beliefs, and I constantly challenge my, predispositions. And I am on a search for what is true. And I accept that Freddie is running across my keyboard. But I accept that what I may accept as true doesn't mirror what everyone else accepts as true. And I'm fine with that. I have no right to judge. Only God does. I have no right to presume that I have the only truth. Only God does. We're all children of God, or to go back to my hippie days, we're all children of the universe. Mm-hmm. I do have some pantheistic attractions, let me say, because if God is the universe, and God is us, and God is everything. So, but yeah, I'm willing to talk to anybody, but I'm not gonna. If someone wants to bring me into a hangout, I'm not gonna suffer attacks. I'm just not. But if you want to have a real intelligent discussion, fine. But other than that, just forget it.
Yeah, I've had a couple of nice conversations with Shelley. She's more on the fundamentalist side. It's all for me. I mean, one of the reasons that were given. I mean, it was Rand giving that reason, but one of the reasons he was giving that I'm not impartial is because I've mocked them or criticised them. I think it was criticise he used, and it's and I pointed out. I said I criticise them for their actions, not because of the faith. The faith doesn't really matter to me, It's nice to talk to people with different points of view. That's how you learn as much about yourself as you do about others. But it's actions. I don't mock them for their belief system. I don't agree with it, but same as I don't agree with you guys. It's not that I think I'm better than you either. I just don't see. I suppose my atheism is based upon, it doesn't make any sense to me. But if it makes sense to you and that works, then great.
Yeah.
I'm very laissez-faire with that. That means leave alone.
Okay, but Tid, I mean, what would do you think that you're going to get criticism from both sides about this, about you finally coming out? To put it another way.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, let's put it this way. When I started to tell people, what I got was a lot of either I don't care or hey, I figured that out. Okay. I'm sure there'll be criticism from certain quarters, and that's fine. My response to that would be, well, for atheists who might be bothered by this, I would ask them to look at what I say and what I have said. I try to champion reason and rationality. I believe in science. I'd also like to point out that I believe in literature and history too. But those are not inconsistent with my stance. As I said, I am a secular humanist. I consider myself a secular humanist, even though I am a Roman Catholic. And you need to remember that a lot of the secular movements in this country were started by theists. because we don't believe, as my grandmother said basically, that religion belongs in the church and in the home, not out in the street scaring the horses. And what is meant by that is not that you don't profess your faith, or you're supposed to set an example by the way you behave. Take certain people out there, please take that a note. You are.
Oh, Jay just dropped.
Just looked.
I was going to say something about this. I think the argument will be made, oh, you should be standing up for Christ, blah, 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 right? Now, in matters where it's very important, yeah. But in online discussions, why, number one, open yourself up to the dog's abuse that you get?
Mm.
But secondly, and I don't know if, I think it will have been noticed, I have never ever said to any of these people who have been, you're not a real Christian and all the rest of it, I have never thrown that back at them, because I'm in no place to judge their faith. And by arguing that with them, I would actually be bringing division into the Church of Christ. When I start trying to throw people out of it, oh, you're not a Christian. That's why I don't do that. I never do it.
Which is kind of ironic, really, because how many times has G-Man said you're not a Christian, or for that matter, was it Ran who excommunicated you? Like he's got the power to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's the thing, that this is one of the reasons why people don't want to actually state their position. Because, and I'm going to be perfectly frank about this, these idiots who appear to be spitting brimstone at everybody who doesn't believe exactly the way they believe are the ones who end up closing mouths. Because when you come out and you say, I am a Christian, and you say you're a Roman Catholic, you're going to get it from both sides. Who wants to volunteer to do that? There aren't many. And this is something that these radical evangelicals need to realise, that they, and the way they behave, they are closing mouths.
And minds. You know, if I'm, you know, am I going to become a more stringent atheist if I, you know, I'm just using me as a colloquial me. If I was Joe Blogs, nobody gets on the internet and comes across this subject, and all I've got is that. It's like, yeah, well, why would I even consider? Why would I consider being a Christian if this is what Christians are like? Nah, I think I'm better off with what I've got. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'd like to bring it back to what I was saying before I had a little catus interrupted. I was trying to chase Freddie away. You know, he knows when I'm talking to people, and periodically he'll try to get my attention, and I accidentally exited myself while I was trying to get him to move. But yeah, my point was, I don't know if what came across before I accidentally, you know, threw myself out, is that you're supposed to set an example. As a Christian, and that's certainly, I'm an imperfect example. We all are. I have a temper. I really try to control my temper. It's why I don't go into certain rooms and talk to certain people, because I know I'm going to lose my temper. And, you know, I'm 65 years old as of May 10th, so I don't think the temper's going to go away anywhere soon, and I've worked on it my entire life. But, at least I try. You need to set an example. And I'd like to point that out to some people who in my opinion, are setting a very poor example. We are seeing today that a lot of young people are leaving the church, and I mean the church again in the broader sense of Christianity, because of fundamentalism, because of the way that the poor are being treated by, or the way they're being talked about by the fundamentalist Christians in the Republican Party. A big factor is, another one is creationism, because kids go to school and they start actually studying I recently pointed out to someone, I said, have you ever read a book on vertebrate paleontology or embryology? Because he was denying the fossil record. And the response was, what about vertebrates and paleontology? And somebody said, no, you ninny, vertebrate paleontology. Because if you'd bothered to study a little bit, and I mentioned vertebrate rather than invertebrate, because vertebrate's a little easier for the layperson to understand. You know, vertebrates being animals with backbones. So you're thinking of like tetrapods, you know, fish and mammals and reptiles and birds and amphibians. So if you actually look at if you spend some time looking into how paleontologists make the decisions they do, I'm actually making a video on this, by the way, you will understand a little bit better. To dismiss the fossil record out of hand without bothering to study it, without bothering to look at what these people look at, is just absurd. But yeah, and the other thing, and this brings me to something that Gary brought up that I didn't mean to dismiss, I just kind of meant to get back to. The other is the LGBT community and LGBT issues. And that is a big one. A lot of millennials are leaving the church because they have friends who are gay or trans, and they realize that it's just what you are. You can't suddenly decide to be straight if you're not. You can't suddenly decide to be gay if you're not. There is a spectrum of sexuality, and it's even more than just sexuality. It includes romantic attraction versus sexual attraction. It deals with your gender identity, and even that is fluid. And we have the evidence, we have the scientific evidence that shows this. And so kids are looking at this anti-gay stuff that's going around, and they're saying, well, if that's the church, I'm rejecting it. And as Gary pointed out, yeah, I'm a homosexual. I'm gay. My sexual attraction is towards women. My romantic attraction is towards both men and women. And there's a difference between a romantic attraction and sexual attraction. In terms of sexuality, in a different sense, I am what's called demisexual. What that means is I don't really get any sexual attraction towards anyone until after I've known them for quite a while. So and I've never believed in jumping into bed with someone. I think I've often said, just because you're gay doesn't mean the rules change. But it's actually, fortunately for me, easier because I'm demisexual, and I realize that. It's not that I'm holier than thou, it's just that I fortunately have a portion of my sexuality that makes it easier for me to avoid those sorts of situations. But no, what I find is ironic when people talk about, people who are gay and people who are sinners. First of all, it's what you are. It's not what you do, it's what you are. Secondly, my sexual morality is actually very conservative. Most of our fundies would probably praise it, but they won't because I'm queer. And it's just what I am. And as I said, we know that homosexuality probably has an epigenetic origin. In other words, it comes about during the development of the fetus, although there are genetic markers towards it. But anything to do with genes is very complicated. Just recently, for example, some scientists were able to stop the development of two proteins in chick embryos, and the chicks, they got varying results, which is, of course, expected. But some of the chicks, instead of forming a beak, formed a sort of a snout, kind of like a reptilian snout, and they find that's very cool. The next step is to try to figure out what genes caused it. And in the paper, they talk about how complicated that is because of, amongst other things, the interaction between genes. So when you have people say, well, where is the gene for that? For a lot of stuff, there isn't a gene for that. For some things like red hair, yeah, there is a gene. I can point you to a video that shows you exactly what gene it is and where it is. But for a lot of things, it isn't that simple. I don't find any conflict between my homosexuality and my Christianity, because it is what I am. It's the way God made me. And I know a lot of people will say, well, gee, I still think that's wrong and you shouldn't engage in sex with a person of the same sex because God says it's wrong. Well, yeah, actually, you know, you've heard the old saying, "What does Jesus say about homosexuality?" And then you listen, all you hear is crickets.
Mm-hmm.
No, I believe there is a Jewish. I had a rabbi once say that chastity is a sincere relationship between two human beings, and that is kind of the way I look at things. Is a sincere relationship between human beings, not a casual relationship, not something just because you want it, but because you have a real connection with that person, and you stop and think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think the early church was way too hung up on sex. I think today's church is way too hung up on sex. That doesn't mean that I think people should just casually sleep with everyone they want. Obviously, it's going to happen because we're human and we get passions and what have you. But, you know, this is just the way I am. That's all there is to it. And if you don't like it, I don't care. If you're against gay marriage, don't get gay married. Homosexuals marry, well, you know what it's going to do to the nation? Absolutely nothing. Actually, it might, because you're going to have some really fabulous weddings that are going to spend a lot of money on, and there are some cities that actually have had their income increase considerably because they embraced the whole homosexual marriage thing.
Well, personally, I would just want to see same-sex marriage because I want to witness the same-sex divorce. I would watch the shit out of that. I'm not sure which comedian made that joke first, but it's actually a pretty entertaining idea.
Well, yeah, and homosexuals are the same as everybody else. I find this obsession with sex ridiculous. If you're in a relationship for a while, with anyone, I don't care if you're homosexual or heterosexual, sex ceases to become that important. It's the relationship that's important. I sometimes look at the sex as sort of like the carrot on the end of the stick to get you into the relationship, and then you develop the relationship. Because to tell me that I'm supposed to be celibate because I'm homosexual is to tell me that I'm never to know love, that I'm never to know that intimate relationship with another human being. I find that abhorrent. I find that anti-Christian. Why would God create humans with this desire for the connection with another human being? And then say, oh, I'm sorry, because you were made a certain way, you can't have that. It has very little, honestly, to do with sex in the long term.
Yeah. Well, you could ask the same question. Why did we make phones?
Well, Jade, I mean, would you ever go into a hangout with someone like G-Man? I know that you have your disagreements with it, but I mean, he's somebody who does make comments about Catholics and stuff and homosexuals and stuff like that, and I'm sure that you've wanted to tell him.
Well, the problem for me is that I would want to be in a hangout with a moderator.
Yeah.
Because we've seen the really bad behavior by certain people.
Oh, yes, that's true.
And talking over people, shouting, not letting them speak. And so yeah, I have no problem with talking to anyone. There are two things. One is I want a moderator because I'm just simply not going to tolerate it. And by the way, I actually would tolerate it a little bit further, but one of the vows I made on my 65th birthday was I'm not going to put up with this shit anymore. It's real simple. Anyone out there, I am now officially a senior citizen. For some of you, that means I'm a crone. I'm a crone. I'm a crone. I love it. I'm a crone. Crone power! So I don't have to put up with your bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm not going to do it. So you can treat me as a you can treat me as a human being in a decent, respectful manner. Or you can just simply not have a conversation with me at all. That doesn't mean things won't get heated occasionally, and people won't talk over each other occasionally, but if you're just going to shout me down, if you're just going to bring up all kinds of crap like, oh, Catholics worship Mary and Catholics bow to idols and things like that, you know, I'm not going to bother talking to you because we're not going to get anywhere. We've seen what happens. I especially have seen what happens when you try to talk about evolution with people, and then they come back and say the same crap. You try to say things like, someone says, well, when in evolution will a dog become a non-dog? And you say, well, never, because that's not what evolution says. And they go, yes, it does. No, it doesn't. It's like banging your head against a brick wall. And I just don't want to do that anymore. If you want to have a reasoned discussion on homosexuality, on religion, on politics, on evolution, I'm fine with that. But I'm not going to deal with, I don't like the idea of having to go back and say, no, I'm sorry, that's not what Catholics believe. No, I'm sorry, that's not what the theory of evolution says. No, I'm sorry, all liberals aren't Marxists. Because it's just a waste of time. If you're interested in an actual discourse, sure.
Yeah.
But at this point in my life, I'm probably just going to say, if you're going to continue along this line, I'm leaving. That's all there is.
Story of you're interested in the conversation.
Yes.
It is between two people.
I mean, I think
Or
tonight's been good. I mean, we've actually discussed all sorts of things here. It's been really good. Without screaming and shouting and bawling. I'm sure we're going to get all sorts of criticism. But guys, I'm going to have to go because I've been up since 2 o'clock this morning. Well, 2 o'clock yesterday morning.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm going to have to go because I'm going to fall asleep. But I really enjoyed this conversation. It's been absolutely fantastic. So thanks to Cliff.
No
Thank you very much, Cliff, for hosting this.
Before you go, can I say one thing? I think this is probably a good time to shut it down anyway.
Yeah.
But what I'd like to do is I'd like to offer an invitation to people out there. I want you to see we've had a nice, reasoned conversation here. If you want to talk to, I mean, I can't necessarily speak for everyone, but I think to a certain extent, I probably can. If you want to come in and have a conversation with us, and just like this, a reasoned conversation, just let Cliff know, and he'll see if he can get the group of us together. And some other day, and we can do this. If you have questions, if you have concerns, if you want to ask where the biblical justification for purgatory is or something like that, that's the time to bring it. And we can have a decent discussion without the... And I would open that to anyone. But at the same time, I know Cliff would, if someone decides to just go crazy, he's going to eject them. Yeah. So that's all I'd like to say is I think it's a good time to shut down.
Yeah.
But I think these conversations should continue. Yeah. But as long as they're reasoned and respectful.
And that is the point, isn't it? It's about respect, respect for each other, respect for ourselves. I mean, a part of respecting ourselves is say, sorry, I'm not going to be involved in a conversation that's going to go nowhere. And the whole point of this, I mean, the euphemistic name for the discussions that we have is supposed to be the great debate. You can't have a debate if it's all about drama. It's all about, oh, so-and-so said this and so-and-so did that. It doesn't go anywhere. Just doesn't go anywhere. So for all the people who've watched and the people who are still watching, this is the end of the broadcast, and thank you for watching. And thank you for everybody who joined.